Run! Go! Get to the Jibber Jabber!
Hey Valerie! It's on Apple Podcasts and Podomatic! Freaking awesome!
Hello and welcome to another special edition of the Jibber Jabber podcast. It's just me, J-Mac, so it's really just the Jibber or the Jabber, you decide. Now, the reason this is a special episode is because it's part of our own It mini-series. Bit of a play on words because there was a It mini-series back in 1990 and that's what the focus of our mini-series is on. Back in 1990 you might remember it well, you might remember it terrified you as a kid, you might remember it terrified your own kids. Certainly terrified me. I talk a little bit about that in this episode. Now, I have a special guest for this episode. Now this guy, we met him in Manchester when we were covering the For the Love of Horror convention. Make sure you check out that footage on Facebook. Facebook? God damn it. on YouTube. We did do some live videos and stuff when we were there as well, just to cover some silliness that was going on. Anyway, that's a sideline. We met this guy down there. He owns one of the screen-used Pennywise costumes that Tim Curry wore for the miniseries. Possibly the only one left. I think a lot of them were thrown out after the production, but again, he gets into that. This guy's name's John Campopiano. Now, he's basically a film fan who, through circumstance, has become a documentary filmmaker. It's an interesting story. So, like I said, we bumped into him down there. I got chatting, and he was happy to come on and discuss his making of his documentary about the It miniseries. He's already made one about Pet Sematary. I like the way we say that in Scotland. Cemetery. It's not a cemetery. Cemetery. Pet Cemetery. So yeah, I sat down and spoke to John for about an hour. And it was a fun conversation. I did ask basically the same question twice, made a bit of a tit of myself, but hey, we all live and learn. You can look out for that part. Really nice guy. He's from Rhode Island, over in the States. The conversation flowed really well. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Again, don't forget to like, subscribe on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Just search for Jibber Jabber Podcast. Hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll catch you very soon.
Oh my god.
Say, what's up, son?
Oh, all I wanted was a Never-Ending Story t-shirt, but Santa didn't bring me one.
Well, Santa Claus didn't go to truffleshuffle.com last year and use JibJab15 when he spent over £20 or more on truffleshuffle.com like you should. That's right, 15% off when you use JibJab15. Exclusive code to the Jibber Jabber podcast. Go now. They have trinkets, t-shirts, mugs, and so much more. Everything you could want, from 80s retro threads to Game Boy console watches. JibJab15 at truffleshuffle.com. Go now!
Yay, Truffle Shuffle.
So, John, thank you very much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's we met in Manchester a few weeks back. You were at the For the Love of Horror convention. What brought you all the way over to the UK for that particular event?
Yeah, so that show, they were having an 1990 reunion with some of the kids from the movie, and so the show flew me over with the Pennywise costume. I've got one of Tim Curry's screen-used Pennywise the Clown costumes, and I've been doing the last couple of years. I've done conventions where I take the suit and set it up and let people check it out and take photos with it, and so they thought that it would be the perfect timing to have me in the suit there when the kids were there. So that's what brought me over.
It was great to see that costume. You said that was one of the screen used ones. Do you know how many there were?
I was told by the costume designer for the miniseries, and she's also the same person that gave me the suit, that they made like 3 or 4 for Tim, and the one I have is the only one that they know of that still exists. So if the other ones are still out there, we don't know where they are. Maybe they were trashed. It's been 30 years. So
Wow.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine kind of throwing something as iconic as that into the trash. That's
Well, I know it's well, and in hindsight, of course, but it's like you see that all the time, especially when they're, films are ending, like, they're tossing props away, they're just clearing house, and it's not iconic yet. And so, like, to them, it's just another job. And in this instance, the costume designer, she saved the suit because she helped design it. But also for people like her, these costumes are like their resume. This is like their CV, like she
yeah.
has a whole closet of her costume archives from past projects. And it's her record keeping of, her work, which is how it ended up lasting, which is pretty cool. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's basically her portfolio. Um, it was great to see that. Now, obviously, the convention was for the love of horror. Now, it's quite clear that you yourself have a love for that genre. Where did that begin? Can you remember?
yeah, so I'm an only child, and I had my best friend growing up, lived across the street, and he had an older brother. And so his older brother and his friends were renting, all the classics back. This was back in the early 90s. So they were renting, Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween and all that stuff. So we wouldn't have been old enough, to rent them ourselves. And our parents weren't super, cool with us watching it. But the older brother and the friends loved to show us all this scary stuff. So that was my introduction to a lot of movies. And I think when I was really little, like, I was just flat out scared. But then, like, you get to an age where you like being scared, and there's a thrill that comes with it. And so I was hooked early. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be one of these genres that seems to catch people early or not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, if you don't love them when you're a kid, the chances are you're never actually going to be a horror fan.
Yeah.
But I've got something to say about that a bit later, actually. But
He was just an average content viewer.
What can I say about Davey? He really didn't like to subscribe too much, you know?
He was a nice young boy. It's a shame about what happened to him, you know?
Until one tragic evening. Put it this way, David would neglect the subscribe here buttons. Yes, it was a quiet town until that tragic evening. Nothing like that ever happened round here. We have it on great authority that young David was mutilated by a pamphlet containing the words subscribe here. It is not known exactly where this pamphlet came from at this present time, but police are looking into it. Don't be like David. Subscribe to the Jibber Jabber podcast and avoid death.
I mate, what is I can't somebody right, he didn't subscribe to the Jibber Jabber podcast, and a chopstick fell in his eye.
Subscribe to the Jibber Jabber podcast now.
Aye mate, you need to go and subscribe, like, cause it's a curse, and if you didn't subscribe it kills you.
Disclaimer, curse does not exist or kill you.
You obviously are a documentary filmmaker. You've made it was Unearthed and Untold, the Pet Sematary story, and you're in post production on the Pennywise, the story of it. Did you went to film school?
No, I didn't at all.
No, wow.
No, I guess I'm a filmmaker, like, by complete accident. So the short version of that is, Justin White, who is a close friend and my, partner on the Pet Sematary documentary.
Yes.
We live in New England, and so we're about 4 hours south of Bangor, Maine. Which is obviously Stephen King, holy ground. And one of the things that we love to do is we love to go to see filming locations. So we, go to, spots that movies that we love were shot. And that started for me even younger, because I used to go to Martha's Vineyard all the time. And of course, that's where they shot Jaws. So I got hooked on filming locations really early. And so we said, hey, let's go up to Maine and find some of the movie locations from Pet Sematary. And so we did that. And it was literally going to be just like to take photos and do some recreation photos for ourselves. And we ended up talking to locals up there that were like, oh, if you're interested in Pet Sematary, you should talk to this person because he worked on the crew. And you should talk to her because she was an extra and she has behind the scenes photos. And it really, one thing led to another. And we found ourselves going up like once a month and talking to people and finding locations and meeting people that had like photo albums from the set, photos from the set in their attics that had been there for 20 years. And we started kind of to collect all of this stuff. And we said, maybe we should write like an article for like a horror magazine about this, or maybe we could even just put together like a little YouTube video. And one thing literally led to another. And we realized halfway through that like, holy shit, like we kind of have a documentary here. And so for me, Justin works in television, but for me, I didn't know anything about filmmaking. And so I was really learning as I went. And so, yeah, it took us about 4.5, 5 years to do it. Because I was a full-time student and Justin's got 2 kids and married, and, I wasn't married at the time, but we were juggling all this other stuff, and kind of chipping away at this documentary on the side. And so, yeah, that's that. So since then, I guess I'm kind of a filmmaker. I mean, people say, yeah, obviously you're a filmmaker. I guess I don't have a huge, vision of myself, I guess. But I'm like, at this point, I guess I consider myself to be a filmmaker, but it was completely by accident.
What a fantastic accident to find yourself part of.
Oh, totally, man. Absolutely. And in some ways it kind of, I had to like learn how to do things, how not to do things. I mean, I look back at and rewatch the Pet Sematary documentary and I'm really proud of it, but obviously I would do a lot of things differently. I kind of cringe at some things.
Yeah.
Like any of it do when you look back at anything, right, that you did, years ago, you're like, oh man, I did that, or like, why did I do that? Or, but it was just the 2 of us, we paid for it out of our own pocket, and it was just 2 guys just trying to make this documentary happen. And so I think the fact that we even finished it at all is kind of a triumph, so.
Absolutely. I mean, you financed it yourselves, just two guys now. Can you remember roughly how much it cost at the time to do it? Obviously, it was over 4 or 5 years, like you said. So it would have been a lot of small expenditures over a long period of time, or was there anything that stands out as, wow, that cost us a lot of money for that one thing?
Well, so normally we were like interviewing people up in Maine and New York, so we could drive to places. But there was one convention, Horror Hound, 2000 and oh god, I don't even remember, 12 or 13. And Dale Midkiff and Brad Greenquist and Miko Hughes were all going to be at this convention, and we hadn't interviewed them yet. And so we said, hey, this is the perfect time. But so that was like, 2 plane tickets and flying with like camera equipment. And then the hotel room and all that other stuff, rental car. So that was an expensive weekend.
Yeah.
And, the thing is, like, we didn't keep really good records of like our expenses because for half of the experience, we didn't even think we were making a film. So it's not like we said, okay, today we're going to start production, keep track of receipts, keep track of what we're spending just so we have an idea at the end.
Yeah.
We were just doing it. But we've crunched numbers over the years, Justin and I, and we kind of figured that we probably spent of our own money over those 5 years, like maybe like $7,000, something like that, $8,000. Which is nothing.
That's actually not that bad. You've surprised me there, because the documentary itself is really polished. It's impressive.
Well, I mean, how it is, and it's like some films are like, low budget in the sense that they don't have a big budget, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like going to be shit quality, But there, we had things that were like we were holding up with duct tape. I mean, it was kind of a ragtag, project. But yeah, and I guess when you're doing it yourself, we're not paying an editor, we're not paying a PA, we're not paying like all these things. So between like just gas, meals, travel, all that stuff, we probably spent like around $7 or $8 grand. So,
well, it's an impressive final product for $7 or $8 grand. That's really good. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. The one thing I really liked about it was a lot of horror, a lot of horror documentaries that you watch, like I remember watching one on the making of The Exorcist, and they just seem to be full of kind of folklore and horror stories around the movie itself.
Yeah.
That your one was straight down the middle, and it seemed to me that it was mostly a pretty easy shoot. Nothing really seemed to go catastrophically wrong. from memory.
Not that they told us about anyway. I mean, I think that's that speaks to like one thing that, if I could do it over, I may have pushed a little bit more on that with people, because I think, I think it's a natural human instinct that when you're interviewing somebody, like, okay, say you were in a movie and I'm like, Jay, what was that movie like, man? And you want to have like a positive spin on history, right? You don't want to be like, oh, actually I was kind of a dick to everybody and I caused a lot of drama. Or like, if you still are in the industry and you're still like trying to get work in Hollywood, you're not going to like throw the producer under the bus and be like, well, the producer was an asshole. And like, you're not going to get some of that juicy stuff because like, you're not trying to like speak ill of somebody or cause any drama. So I think by and large, it was a pretty smooth shoot. But I think, there were, let's put it this way, and I'll tell you about these after we're recording. There were some things that happened up in Maine that we were told about, but that we were asked to maybe not include in the documentary.
Yeah, let's do that off the record. That's going to be fun.
No, you're right. For the most part, I think it was a pretty smooth.
Yeah, it got to the part where they were going to be burning down the facade for. Oh God, I can't remember.
Fred Wynn.
Yeah. What was his character's name? It's totally escaped me.
Yeah,
Judd, yeah. They were burning that down, and as soon as that segment started, I was like, okay, how many people died? I was like, really? None. It was fine.
Yeah, even that little house, right? That little house got it unscathed. So.
Yeah, the owners must have been petrified.
Yeah, well, they talk about that in the doc, right? I think they were kind of like, well, they said that they knew what they were doing, so whatever. And that's the main attitude, man. Those two, and he has since passed away, Charlie. So we were glad to have gotten his story on camera. But that's the epitome of the main attitude, just like laid back, casual. It's like, oh, you want to build a fake house on top of my real house, and then you want to burn the fake one down? Yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's amazing how in that area of America on the East Coast, everywhere kind of looks really similar. Like apart from the big cities, obviously. But I've got family in Connecticut, and we spent 3 weeks there when I was a kid, and looking back on it, I'm like, this place, this whole area kind of lends itself to horror. You've got these houses that were built. A lot of houses are really old, and they've just got a creepy vibe about them. And every house has got so much land and maybe forestry behind it and stuff. And it's an area that lends itself to the genre. So that's great. What was the reason you chose Pet Sematary? Was it basically because it kind of fell into your lap, like the way you've just told me, or did you go out thinking, I love Pet Sematary so much that this is the film that I want to really kind of dive into?
Yeah, so the way that happened was, and Pet Sematary was, a film that, just like I was telling you before, older brother of a friend put it on, and it was the Zelda stuff that it just scared me so bad as a little kid, and so the movie kind of always stuck with me, and just seeing a little kid get run over by a truck. I mean, I had never seen, I had never seen anything like that in film before, and I think a lot of people had probably never seen a film willing to go that far. And so that leaves an impression, right? Whether it's good or it's bad or whatever, you don't forget it. And so I had gone to a convention and met some of the cast before we started, and I showed my buddy Justin the poster. I have this one sheet poster, and I was like, dude, check out these signatures I got. I met Denise Crosby and blah blah blah. And he was like, "Oh man, I'm a huge fan of that movie as well." And I didn't know that because we met in the Jaws community, like fellow Jaws fans, and so Jaws was like the movie that we always kind of talked about and whatever. And so I said, "Oh, well, I was thinking about going up to see some of the locations, later this summer. Do you want to come with me?" And he was like, "Absolutely." And so that's kind of how it started. But that's pretty much how we connected over it, and ended up going to Maine, and then the rest is kind of history. So.
Yeah, I mean, I never seen Pet Sematary until I was in my 20s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll tell you the reason for that in a second. But the first thing I noticed was, oh my God, there's Tasha Yar from Star Trek. That was I grew up. My dad was a big Star Trek fan, so that was the first thing that stood out to me. How did it feel when you got into making this documentary by accident? It sounds so funny to say out loud. When you got into making this, how did it feel when you actually got to start sitting down with these people that you'd kind of grown up admiring on screen in that movie?
It was surreal, right? I mean, even just meeting people at conventions can be a little bit surreal. And it was, there's this, I don't know if you've heard this saying before, this term imposter syndrome, which basically just means like, I'm sitting here interviewing, say, Denise Crosby, and I feel like a total imposter of like, I don't even know how I deserve to be sitting here. Like, I felt like this isn't even right. Like, I was thinking that like, oh, eventually the cast is going to figure out that I'm like a phony and just like walk out, like that's what I was thinking of. Like, I don't even deserve to be sitting here interviewing these people. So it was like a lot of that like imposter syndrome, especially then, because like I knew that I was just, faking it until I made it in terms of making a film. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I was trying to look like I knew what I was doing. And the more we worked on it and as time went on, I understood what we were doing and I got a grasp on it. But especially in those early days, just being like, I don't know how to interview somebody. Like, yeah, I don't know what I'm, because I was always the one asking the questions. Justin was the DP, basically. So he was working the lights and the camera. And I was the one in the hot seat talking with people, trying to, engage in a conversation that felt natural and ask them questions that made them comfortable, but got us good stuff. And so it was always kind of weird and surreal. But yeah, it was very cool. It was very fun. I kind of, the fact that we weren't getting paid to do it never bothered me at all, because I'm sitting here with Dale Midkiff talking about, making Pet Sematary. And I was like, hell yeah, this is great.
Yeah, we find that a lot doing the podcast. I mean, we've never made a penny from podcasting. I don't. Most podcasters don't. It seems to be one of these industries where you can only make money at it if you're already famous.
yeah, it's true.
But even now, I mean, this is me interviewing you, and I've never done this before. I've never. Well, certainly haven't done it myself. But it's. Like you said, it's about conversation as opposed to question, and I think that seems to work. I hope you're comfortable enough. So going back to getting into horror movies, most people, like I said, get into horror as children. What do you think it is about the horror genre in particular that really seems to appeal to children?
Well, I think that there's like an element of like adventure and like, it's especially for like a lot of people, you hear stories from everybody talking about, well, I'd stay up late and wait for my parents to go to sleep, and then I would go watch the movies on like late night television, or or you have an uncle that would show you these movies, or a friend, or like and so there's something kind of like risque about it. There's sort of something like, you're kind of, it's like mischievous in a way, like you feel like you're getting away with something by watching horror movies when you're a little kid. And then there's also, I think, the element that people always talk about too, which is like, it's like a thrill ride, but you're completely safe, right? So it's like, you can be like terrified but also be like in the comfort and safety of like your own home or a friend's house,
Yeah.
So it's that thrill element that's exciting, especially when you're a little kid. It's like, yeah, it's a thrill ride,
Yeah, it's almost like an adrenaline rush.
Yeah,
it's one of these reasons that people like being scared is that kind of fight or flight reaction that it gives you. Now, obviously, childhood is something that always seems to really feature quite prominently in certainly Stephen King's stories.
Yeah.
Did you meet Stephen King at all when you were doing this documentary, or was that something that you just never managed to do? Or
yeah, it never worked out. It's a longer story, but the short version is that we got very close to interviewing him. And at one point we got like a tentative, yes, he'll give you an interview, and then it fell apart. He's a tough guy to get to. And when we were working on this documentary, he was in the middle of promoting his Kennedy book from like a bunch of years ago. And so, it just didn't work. But he has a copy of it, and he gave his blessing, and he watched it. and liked it, and so he's aware of it. But
How did that
unfortunately,
feel?
yeah.
How did that feel, knowing that he actually liked what you made?
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, it was surreal. I mean, obviously you've seen it, so you know that like we really focus on Maine because Maine is like a big
Yeah.
part of the movie, and he obviously is so connected to Maine and has done so much for the state, and Maine is his home. So he cares a lot about the state, and because we feature it so prominently, I think he appreciated that. And we're interviewing locals and stuff that were a part of the movie and people that you've never heard of before, and kind of the small town, unsung heroes of movie making, so I think he appreciated that, and so it was very cool. Yeah, it was very cool.
Oh, that's awesome. How easy did you find it getting to do, like, when you wanted to do an interview with, say, Denise Crosby, for example? How easy was it to actually get that?
So the funny thing is, like, it gets easier as you interview people and they kind of vouch for you. So, and that was very much what happened with the Pet Sematary documentary. We got we did the first interview with Susan Blumart, who plays Missy Dandridge, the housekeeper. She was the very first interview that we shot. And so as you interview more people, like Brad Greenquist is still very good friends with Denise Crosby. And so once we had we interviewed Brad, and he was like, "Oh, these guys are great. They're professional." He kind of told Denise that, which made Denise comfortable, and she gave us her interview. Denise is really good friends with Mary Lambert, the director. So once we interviewed Denise, she could vouch to to Mary and say these guys are legit and professional. And so it was kind of like a domino effect. And so then the more interviews we had, the more we could say, oh, we've already spoken with this person and this person and this person, and it made it easier getting interviews. I don't think with the exception of King, I don't think we got anybody that said no. I could be misremembering, but I don't think anybody declined an interview, which is cool.
That's fantastic.
There were some people that we had. It took a couple of years to get them, like the twins, the little who played the daughter, Ellie Creed. The twins took a couple of years to get because they just weren't convinced that it was worth their time or that we were legitimate. And it was funny. They said, they basically told me no for like 3 years. And then towards the end, I made one last attempt. So I said, all right, I'm going to email them one more time. And by then we had interviewed everybody in the cast. And so it went from them being like, no, thanks, we don't want to do it, to now they're the only ones not in it. So then they were like,
yeah,
if everybody else is in it, we need to be in it. And then we got the interview. So, that's just how it goes, man.
Did you find it quite awkward sending those multiple emails? Like after you get the first rejection, is it tempting at that point just to say, oh, well, fuck it, we're not going to get it? Or were you immediately just saying to yourself, no, let's keep at this. They'll come round.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was awkward to keep pushing. But, I think I was dealing with an agent too. So there was like a little bit of, there was a degree of separation there. So yeah, I felt awkward, but I also said like, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to try. Why not? And then once we had everybody else and like we sort of distribution looked like it was going to happen, I went back to them and, like I said, I was like, hey, we've interviewed everybody. It looks like this is going to get distributed and actually be a real thing. Are you sure you don't want to, like, we'll come to you. They're in New York, or like, we'll come to you. We'll make it easy. And then it was like, oh my God, well, yeah, if everybody's in it, like suddenly they felt left out and then wanted to be in it. So, it worked out.
That's great. And how did that feel when they finally said yes? Were you like, oh God, thank Christ.
Justin and I, we went out for a beer and celebrated. Like it because it was just, that was like, to us, it felt like a big hole in the documentary. Like where's Ellie Creed, and so we were just thrilled. I think that was the most excited we got over any interview for that project, because for so long we didn't think it was going to happen. So it felt great to finally land it.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed the documentary, and I've been recommending it since I've seen it. Do you know the problem with a lot of these making of documentaries is they're far too short. They try and cram a year's worth of filmmaking into a 30-minute show, and it's just like, nah, there must be more. There has to be more. And obviously yours ran near 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the original cut we had was longer. But again, that was just sort of being a newbie at filmmaking, because, you know, when you're like, think about it. Like if you're interviewing, you know, say you love the film. So we love Pet Sematary. So we're fans first. And now we're making a documentary about it. It was like everything that everybody said was gold to us. So, you know, it was like every little detail someone shared with us. We were like, that's awesome. That's great. Got to put that in the documentary. But then, like, the documentary can't be like 3 or 4 hours long either, right? So you got to be reasonable and make cuts and stuff. So we had a longer cut, you know, that we ended up shortening considerably.
Was there anything you were so close to leaving in that you had to get rid of, even though you didn't want to?
Oh man, I don't remember, to be honest. It's been a few years now, but I don't think so. I mean, I think everything that's pretty much like worth being in the film is there. And I mean, to your point about like some of these documentaries being too short, one of the other complaints that I sort of have about some of the documentaries, not so much the ones that have come out in the last few years, but some of the older ones, is that like they're padded with tons of footage from the movie.
Yeah.
It's like we know the movie. Like I don't need to see half of the movie in the documentary, you know.
Dude, that was one of my next questions.
Right, and so the reason that we don't have a single frame of footage from the movie in the documentary, and we don't have any of the music in the documentary, and that simply comes down to licensing. You know, that's an easy answer as to why that happened. You know, we went to Paramount and asked what it would cost to license footage from the movie to put in the documentary, and they gave us some like astronomical number. I think just to tell, you know, they were just basically trying to get us to go away. But it was something like $50,000 a second or something, like literally that, like a laughable amount. And so obviously that wasn't going to happen. And we didn't want to get sued. Like we could just throw it in there anyway and say, well, fuck you guys. We're going to use, you know, we're going to fill the movie with footage, but we wanted to go to film festivals and we wanted to get distribution. And as it was, even without film footage in the documentary, we had a hard time getting distribution because people were like, well, did Paramount Pictures sign on? Like, are they cool with you doing this documentary? And we were like, I don't know. And they're like, sorry guys, we're not touching it, because it was, you know, they were concerned it was going to be like a liability legally for them. So that was really tough. But you know, it worked out because we had to get creative with how we portrayed certain scenes. And that's when we hired artists to like do some animations and do some like paintings and you know, we tried to fill in those gaps in other creative ways that mostly worked out.
So when I was watching it, obviously I noticed that there was no footage for the film, no music. When I seen certain photographs, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's just a screenshot. But obviously, it's not even a screenshot. These are photographs that were taken at the time on set.
Yeah, all behind the scenes photos. Yeah, there isn't a single photo or you know, clip from the movie at all in there. So
man, that's amazing. Like I said, it does. I mean, for the fact that, I mean, you spent a lot of time on it, obviously over 4 or 5 years. So that in itself, if you were to look at that on a monetary level, it would be this is so many man hours. But when you're doing a passion project like that, you don't give a shit.
Yeah, it's true. We never, you know, it was never a problem. It was always fun to work on, and it was always worth it. And yeah.
So I'm going to move on from Pet Sematary now to talk about the film that actually caused you and I to cross paths, and it's It. Now, I said to you that I didn't watch Pet Sematary until Cemetery. That's a new word. Cemetery. Pet Sematary until I was older. Now, the reason is when I was 8. Now I was born in 1984, so I think by the time, I think it was about 7 or 8, and I saw the It miniseries. My neighbour had brought it round, and it scared the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
to the point where, like, I couldn't sleep without a light on. Sometimes even with a light on, I couldn't sleep. I would have to sneak into my little sister's room for protection. That sounds so silly
wow.
So it absolutely terrified me. The film that actually brought me back to horror didn't happen until I was about 14, 15. So that's a good number of years. I just would not watch a horror film. But the film that brought me back was An American Werewolf in London.
Nice.
which was, it showed me that things could be scary but also funny, and that brought me back to the genre. Now, I mentioned on a previous one of our podcasts that personally for me now, when I watch the miniseries, although I enjoy it, I don't find it scary anymore.
Yeah.
I described it at the time as being like an episode of Goosebumps, but with a few more adult elements thrown in. Now, I mean, I still watch it. I watch it at least once a year. I still really enjoy it. I think it was obviously a victim of budget, and obviously with the fact it was a TV movie, you just don't get the money that's thrown towards the big movies. But
yeah,
I think, are you a similar age to me? Are you a bit younger?
I was 85. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, did you see it when it came on TV in America initially, or
no? I would have been too little. Actually, it's funny. It aired 29 years ago tomorrow here in the States.
Yeah, let's say today, so I can put it out tomorrow, and it sounds awesome.
Yeah. So the mini series in the States anyway. I don't know about where you guys are, but night one, part one of the miniseries aired on November 18th, 1990, and then part two aired on November 20th. And my birthday's in the middle, so my birthday's is Tuesday, the 19th. So I always thought that was cool growing up. That like, oh man. But no, I would have been 5. So I would have been 5 for part one, and then 6 for for part 2. So I was too little. I watched it again. Friend's older brother rented it and put it on, and
everyone knows that one irresponsible person.
Yeah, thank God for those people, man.
Yeah, thank God for them. Whether it's an uncle or a neighbor or a friend, we need those people in our lives. Otherwise, there's no adventure.
Yeah, totally.
So, when do you think you seen it? How old do you think you were?
I was probably 7 or 8.
Right. And did it have that kind of same effect on you that it had on me, where it terrified you, or did you just love it?
No, I didn't get past the Georgie scene the first time it was put on for me.
Wow. Okay.
I made up some bullshit excuse like, "Oh, guys, I got to go home. Like my mom wants me for something," and I walked because I was across the street. My parents lived across the street, so I didn't want to like get made fun of and be like, "Guys, I'm too scared. I'm actively shitting my pants while we're watching this, so I have to leave." I didn't want to say that. So I was just like, "Oh, I gotta go." But I was terrified. I like when he shows his teeth and grabs his arm and all, that's as far as I got in like a 3.5 hour movie. I made it into like the first 10 minutes.
Do you know what? I was exactly the same. I was exactly the same moment. I was like, "No, fuck this, I'm out." And then it still, I'd only seen 10 minutes of the program, 10 minutes of the show or the movie. And that was me. I didn't touch a horror film for 5-6 years.
Exactly. So it didn't turn me off for the genre altogether, but I don't think I revisited the miniseries for another 3 years. And then I was old enough where I enjoyed the scares and I could, embrace it. It was fun. And then I watched the whole thing. But yeah, that turned me off for the movie for a couple of years at least.
And how do you think it stands up today? Obviously, I've given you my opinion on it now, but how do you think it stands up?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm always it's like I don't know. I have like different opinions about like how to answer that kind of a question because I take like issue like when I see someone say like, "Oh, that film is so dated." It's like,
oh, that's horrible.
It's like it's of its time. Like, it is. Like, you can't blame a movie for like, "Oh, that's so 1990." It's like, well, no shit, it was made in 1990. Like, what do you like? What do you want it to feel like? You know what I mean? But I mean, I know what you're getting at, and like, I've always sort of felt that like some of the performances are pretty stiff. Obviously, you look at the special effects now in hindsight with what what can be done today and stuff, and obviously it feels dated in that way. I agree with you. Like, I haven't found it scary since probably that first time I watched it.
Yeah.
But I've always appreciated the pace of the movie. I've always appreciated, I think the kids are fantastic. They all feel like kind of broken misfits. Like they just casted beautifully.
They
Tim
really
Curry,
were. Yeah.
Tim Curry is obviously Tim Curry. Skarsgård is great, but like, I don't know, Tim Curry's performance is like just something else.
They're so different, so different. Considering that it's exactly the same source material, the performances and the characters they make out of this evil clown, this evil being, it's two sides of the same coin. There's nothing, there's literally nothing similar from one to the next. There's no similarities between them at all, other than the fact it's a clown.
Yeah, no, it's very different, and I mean, it should be. I was always saying, when they announced, because they talked about remaking it for years, and it just never happened. And I remember saying, like in 2017, that I wish they would do like a 10-part miniseries, like on Netflix. Do 10 hours, because that book is so big, and you could do that easily with how much material there is.
What is it, 1,400 pages, something like that?
Something like that, a little less, but yeah, you're in the ballpark, 1,200, 1,300. So. There's a lot of source material there. But anyway, yeah. So how does it hold up? I think it holds up. I mean, people are still interested in it. People still watch it, I mean, so that says something. I think hopefully our documentary will fill a lot of gaps, because, I mean, one of the other attractive things, going back to Pet Sematary for a second, like why we wanted to do the documentary, was that there was no behind the scenes photos, footage, anything from Pet Sematary.
Mm-hmm.
And I always just felt like, we don't need another Nightmare doc. We don't need another Evil Dead doc. We don't need another Halloween doc. Like, these stories have been told and beat to death over and over. How about some of these other films? The miniseries is the same thing, right? I mean, growing up, especially like the early days of the internet and stuff, there were no behind the scenes photos from the miniseries. Nothing. Tim Curry never talked about it. You never saw any interviews of people talking about being in the movie. So I felt like there was like a pretty big gap to be filled with this kind of stuff.
Did you ever see the photograph of Tim Curry dressed as Pennywise holding an umbrella, smoking a cigarette? it's one of my favorite photographs.
Yeah, it's fantastic. That was I think that originally that was in a film magazine. I forget what the magazine is. I have it somewhere. But you had little stuff like that, right? Like Fangoria. Fangoria was the only genre magazine on the set.
Yeah.
So they had a couple issues of some behind the scenes stuff, stories with Bart Mixon. But, by and large, there wasn't a lot of content out there in the world. So,
yeah. Like I said, I mean, it is, at the time when I saw it, it scared the ever-loving shit out of me. Just in that first kind of 10 minutes. And I hope it keeps on doing that. I really do. Like I'll probably show it to my kid when he turns maybe 8. My wife's gonna hate me for it, but yeah, I'll let him see it and see how many sleepless nights we can get out of that.
Right.
I've never read the book, which it pains me to say that, because I really should have read it by now. Had you read the book before you started kind of delving into the possibility of making the documentary, or was it one of the first things that you did when you decided you were going to do that?
Yeah, I read the book a bunch of years ago, so I had already read it. But it's not, there were people, I'm a super slow reader, and there are people out there that are like fast readers and can like blow through a book that size, but it takes me forever. So it's not a book that I've gone back to, really. At some point I'll reread it. But I haven't read it in a long, long time. But I had read it maybe in the mid 90s, late 90s, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you think the original miniseries dealt with the source material? Do you think it did pretty well, or is there a lot of things that you go, wow, that's really different? Or
yeah, they changed a lot of things, but then there are some elements that are better and that were more faithful to the book. It's hard when it's a book that size, and it's also like a lot of the dialogue is like internal dialogue with Bill. So it's like, how do you communicate that to the screen? It's impossible in some ways. One cool thing that is a story that we talk about in the documentary, which speaks to your question about, the source material. Obviously the blood oath that the losers take as kids.
Yes.
You see that in the new movie, right? In Andy's version, they do that where they cut themselves. But in 1990, here in the States anyway, the AIDS crisis
yeah, of course.
was in full swing at that point, and the producers were just like not even going to consider showing kids cutting themselves and the exchanging of blood or sharing of blood. So that's when they rewrote it. They all take a hit on the inhaler. That's how that came about.
That's a really clever workaround.
Super clever.
Yeah, that's really clever now that I look at it that way. I never even thought about that until as soon as you started saying that sentence, I just thought AIDS.
Yeah.
and that's the first time I've ever said AIDS and laughed in the same sentence. There we go.
It doesn't happen too.
So no, that it was, yeah, that's a really clever way of dealing with it. That's cool. Obviously they did do that in the new one, like you said. Now I noticed actually earlier I just seen a photograph of you standing with Andy Muschietti.
Yeah.
Now, when did that happen?
So the photo you're talking about is probably from the premiere of Chapter 1 back in 2017.
So you got to go to that?
Yeah, I got an invite to go to that, which was really cool. I went to Chapter 2 as well earlier this year. But yeah, so I had met Andy, like we were kind of just like bullshitting over Instagram for a while, because he knows about the documentary and stuff. And then so I, met him finally in person at the premiere, and that was so cool, man. I was standing in line. Talk about a surreal moment, man. Put yourself in this moment for a second, right? So I'm standing in line getting popcorn before the movie starts. Seth Green is behind me. So now he and I are talking about the documentary and catching up. And then I get a tap on my shoulder, and it's Andy walking by with a bunch of people. And he goes, "Hey, you made it. Great. I'll catch you later." And I was just like, dude, what is happening?
That's fantastic.
Totally surreal. Yeah, but so that's where that happened. That was the after party. I think the photo you're talking about was at the after party for the premiere of the first one, Chapter 1. Yeah.
Did you speak to him for some time, or was it a quick kind of a fleeting moment?
No, we chatted. Yeah. We had a glass of wine and we were chatting at the after party, and he's awesome. He was just asking about how the documentary is coming along, and we were, he and I have stayed in touch, and we send messages back and forth once in a while. He's a great guy. He really is, and his sister Barbara, who's the producer on the movies as well. They're as cool as can be, down to earth. I can't say enough cool things. When I did a short film, Georgie, earlier this year.
Yes.
And I sent it to them, and they like gave me feedback, and they watched it. I mean, just like really cool, right? Like they didn't have to do that. So they're the best. Yeah.
Actually, when I seen the name Barbara Muschietti, for some reason I just always assumed it was his wife. I had no idea it was actually his sister.
Yeah, it's his sister. Cool. Yeah, and they've been collaborating since the beginning, which is really cool. So.
Yeah, I think the first time I seen one of his films was Mama.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that his first major release?
It was, yeah, and that's a cool story, man. So that Mama was a short film. It was like a 2-minute short, and Guillermo del Toro saw it and approached Andy and said, "Hey, you need to make this as a feature, and I'll come on and I'll produce it, and you direct it." And so he kind of gave Andy his first big break, and they would shoot Mama. They were shooting Mama on the same soundstage and at the same time that Guillermo was shooting Pacific Rim. And so they would shoot Pacific Rim during the day, and then at night, Andy would use the same sound stages, and they would shoot Mama. And that kind of put him on the map. And obviously Christ, it's between the two films, it's like $1 billion franchise now. So, Andy is going to probably be able to do whatever he wants in Hollywood for the rest of his career, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. I seen the first movie in the cinema. In fact, I've seen them both in the cinema. What am I talking about? I've seen them both in the cinema, and I saw the first one, and I walked out of that really smiling. I absolutely loved it. My wife, she said, I didn't really find it that scary. I was like, yeah, but even if you didn't find it scary, it was fucking fun.
Yeah,
It was
totally.
so much fun. It was like the Goonies with some horror thrown in, and I loved that aspect of it.
Yeah.
The I think somebody actually did say we spoke to, well, I say we, I couldn't be there, but Kevin, my co-host, he spoke to Brandon Crane yesterday. So he did
Oh,
a
nice.
a podcast with Brandon. Super nice guy. I can't
Oh,
I
he's
can't
the best, man. Yeah, he's the
yeah,
best.
he was so nice, so accommodating. It was really great to get to speak to him, and he was actually, I think he was actually talking about the fact that I think somebody, it might have been Stephen King himself, said that it is Stand By Me with horror,
Hmm.
and it really is when you look at it. It's a coming of age tale, and that's something that Stephen King has always done so well.
Oh, definitely, man. I mean, I think that, that is something he doesn't get enough credit for. I mean, I think he's synonymous with like the king of horror and scares and all that. But I think, his ability to sort of write about the childhood experience is just like unlike anybody else.
Yeah,
And that's
I
why
mean,
you care about these stories, right? Like if you didn't give a shit about the kids and it, then it doesn't work.
yeah.
And that's what he's really able to do. He can really tap into like not only what it's like to be a kid, but like to be a kid and be kind of an outsider, right? Like whether you're overweight, whether you've got asthma, like me, right? I was a skinny kid with asthma and got picked on for being both as a kid. So like obviously I'm going to connect with it, right? Like I'm going to get who these kids are. Like I'll know them, you know.
Yeah.
And so it just has more meaning. The scares are great, but like it doesn't matter. The scares don't mean anything if you're not invested in the characters and you believe their story and um, so yeah, Brandon's right for sure.
Yeah. Um, the the fact that he does the character development so well is what makes the films and the books what they are. You really do feel vested in these people's lives. They almost become real people in your mind, and that's such a hard thing to do, especially in horror when most people are just incidental characters.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah.
So yeah, so we spoke to Brandon last night. I'm getting to speak to you tonight, so this is this is great. Our podcast is now going places, and it feels really good.
Did he mention the project that we're working on together, or did he not mention it?
No, he didn't.
Okay, well then I won't say anything. We'll come back on and talk about it together. He and I, once it's sort of up and going. But he and I are collaborating on a
He did.
short film project.
He did mention a short film project in
That's it.
May. Is that the one?
That's it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, he did mention it, but he went into zero detail, so I won't ask you. I won't ask you to do
He
anything.
didn't want me to yell at him if he said too much, and I was like, "Brandon, shut your mouth, dude."
God damn it, man!
Yeah.
No, so he did mention that there is something coming, but there was no details given whatsoever. So
Yeah, I'm the guy behind it with him and Ryan Grulick, who's a great filmmaker in Seattle. He and I did Georgie together.
Right.
Yeah. So
something else we can look forward to.
hell yeah, dude. Yeah.
So just quickly going back to your documentary. Obviously, I don't want you to give away too many details. We want to see it. We don't want to get too much in the way of spoilers. But do you have any highlights of making the documentary that you want to talk about? Something that stands out, like wow, that was a great moment, or
Well, first and foremost, without a doubt, and I bet all the guys that I worked on the doc with would agree. Tim Curry, man. I mean, we didn't really know if we were going to get him if he would agree to an interview, and he did. It took about a year to sort of like confirm it and work out the details and stuff. But when we ended up doing that interview, we did it at his house. He had us over to his house in Burbank, California, and we showed up, and we got there, and like they had iced coffee. We drink iced coffee over here in the States. You probably know that already, but
we do it here too, just not quite as prominently as you guys. But
yeah,
it is a thing.
Had, like, iced coffee and like cookies waiting for us there. And so then so that was really cool. And like we sort of just turned Tim Curry's living room into a studio, with the lights and the backdrop and the cameras and all that stuff. And we interviewed him. and he was amazing. We brought him a bottle of wine. I asked one of his close friends who was there, I said, we want to bring him something as a thank you. What does he, what should we bring? And she's like, he loves red Italian wine. We're like, done, got it. So we brought him some wine, and we spent like 2 hours with Tim Curry at his house interviewing him. And then afterwards, he was cool. We were just shooting the shit, and he went outside and had a cigarette in his backyard with a couple of the guys on the crew who smoke. And it was just like, holy shit, man, we're hanging out with Tim Curry at his house. And it's like, it's a beautiful house. He's got beautiful artwork everywhere. And he's got some fan art that people have sent him that he's actually hung up, like of him as different characters throughout his career.
That's great.
So yeah, that's like a pinch me moment. Like we're in his house, like interviewing him for, it's just like, so that's got to be one of the big highlights for sure.
So where does he live? I don't need his address, but
his address, no problem. Yeah. No, he lives in Burbank, California, which is like a suburb of LA.
Yeah. A beautiful place in the world, really.
Yeah.
So, anything else? Any other moments that you go, wow, this is fantastic? How did I get to this place in my life? This is great.
Oh man, it felt like almost every moment, like doing the documentary, felt that way. I mean, being out in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada, where they filmed it, stepping into those filming locations. I mean, it's surreal. It never gets old. Stepping into a filming location that you've seen hundreds of times on screen and just being like, I'm here, like that to me is always like a really humbling kind of out of body experience. So, being in Vancouver was amazing. I think when we interviewed, so like all the kids, right? All the kids from the miniseries are doing conventions together and stuff. But when we interviewed them in 2017, most of them hadn't seen each other since the filming. So there was a moment when we just happened, it was a coincidence, but we happened to schedule Brandon's interview and Ben Heller's interview on the same day, right around the same time. So we interviewed Ben, and then Brandon came in. And at one point, we had some downtime, and we were in the office at the studio that we rented. And Ben and Brandon were just in the corner catching up. They literally like hadn't seen each other in maybe like a decade or something. I don't know, but like a long time. And so to sort of be a fly on the wall, watching them catch up, these two guys that I grew up with on screen, that was cool. I was like, oh man, this is like, the documentary is kind of bringing these guys together in a way again, which is a very cool sort of accident. It's a byproduct of doing the documentary. And of course now they're doing conventions, and we've done, a convention in London and then Manchester. And we've got a couple, we're trying to line up some for next year because it's the 30th anniversary of the miniseries. So those guys have kind of become friends now. I mean, Ben and his girlfriend came out to Boston and stayed with my wife and I for like 3-4 days, and we showed them around and did stuff. So like,
that's cool.
To be able to establish friendships with these guys outside of it. We rarely, if ever, talk about the movie when we're together because we're talking about other stuff or we're doing other things. And so that's obviously a highlight too, that some friendships have kind of spawned out of this project is very cool.
Man, that is so cool. I mean, I know you haven't been to Scotland at all yet.
Not yet. No, there's some talks for maybe something next year, but we'll see what happens. I don't know if, we'll see, but would love to go.
Yeah, it is a beautiful country, and you really should try and get to Scotland at some point. And if you do, then we can meet up and have a pint.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So, the documentary, I know it's in post production right now. How close is it to being ready for release?
It's getting there. It's pretty close. We pretty much have a locked cut, mostly. And so then all the other stuff has to go in, photos and footage and all the other kind of post-production sweetening stuff that happens. But our hope is to have it out in the first quarter of 2020. So, I'd like it to be out. I mean, we would all like it to be out by March. But again, the tricky thing is that none of us are full-time filmmakers. We all have 9-to-5 jobs, and we all have partners or wives, and it's hard. because you want to dedicate 24/7 to it, but we just can't.
Yeah.
But
So,
it's close. It's close. Yeah.
What is your 9 to 5, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't mind. I work in television. I work for PBS here in Boston. I'm basically like an audio visual archivist. So I work in the archives and work with all like the moving image media, and I work with our producers who are making documentaries for the show. I work for a show called Frontline, which is we're investigative documentary television.
Yeah.
So that's the short answer. I'm basically a digital archivist working for PBS. So it's kind of connected to what I do outside of work, which is nice.
Yeah. Does that give you any kind of advantage, like any kind of, what am I trying to say, like a stepping stone to doing what you're doing on the side?
I think it does, in the sense of like I can see people that like, are really fucking talented, that are like filmmakers that have, that like Emmy winning documentary filmmakers. Like I can see their process and I'm just around it all the time. And so I feel like I'm just sort of absorbing, good influences, which I think helps me with my own filmmaking. And then, sometimes I can borrow equipment. For example, if I have a shoot that I'm going to go on for something I'm doing, like, if it's available, I can like borrow equipment, which is nice.
That's awesome. That's one thing we struggle with when we've started doing a lot of kind of video stuff now, and we've got a great camera and a great cameraman. With his shoulder rig and everything, you saw him when you were in Manchester.
No, nice setup, yeah.
But it's like we'd love to have like a steady cam and stuff like that, just to make it that little bit more polished. But that's something that it may come in time.
Yeah.
So, what else do you have coming up? I know that you've got the short film with Brandon that we talked about a minute ago. Do you have anything else in the works on the side?
Yeah, I've got a short film coming out for PBS. It's a short documentary that's going to come out just before Thanksgiving, our holiday Thanksgiving. So that'll be out in like a week and a half, and that's not horror film related. I think you'll still kind of dig the story. So that'll be out in about a week and a half, and then we're in post-production. We still have some interviews, but I'm also working on this biopic about Robert Englund called Icon.
Okay.
You should check that out. Yeah, it's the same guys that I'm doing the It documentary with. So we were in LA for a couple of weeks this summer shooting interviews. It's a biopic about the life and career of Robert Englund. He's a part of it as well. So that's called Icon: The Robert Englund Story. And there's a Facebook page for that and all that stuff. So check that out for sure. That'll be out next year sometime. And then I've got another short film, the one with Brandon. So we're going to shoot that in May of next year. And I'm also shooting another short doc in December, this December. Just finalized all of that. That's going to be a cool story, man. It's a short doc about a monster movie that almost got made. So it didn't actually end up being a movie, but they shot a trailer and they've got some amazing like footage and photos. And that was like a local thing here in Massachusetts. So I'm going to sort of tell the story about this movie that almost got made. So that'll be a fun little project. And then I'm hoping to do one more like retrospective doc, kind of in the style of the Pet Sematary one next year, about the movie Alligator, which is another movie I grew up with, Robert Forster. And so, so a lot of stuff going on, man. It's going to be a busy year.
I don't know how you do that with a full-time job and a wife.
I don't either, dude.
It's very impressive. It must take a lot out of you. It must take a kind of a toll on your physical being. But
yeah, well, you got to take care of yourself. I mean, it's sleep's important, and you got time management's important, and but I also don't work on this stuff by myself either. Like I've got colleagues that are super talented and help, and it's always a team effort. So if it were just me alone, yeah, I don't know that I could pull it off. But I work with some really awesome, talented people and friends, and so that's how the magic is made. So yeah.
Man, that's awesome. One other quick question I have for you. Your Pennywise, the story of it. Obviously, you're hoping to bring it out kind of early in the new year, or certainly in the first quarter. Do you have any? Is a studio backing behind it, or is it completely independent? Like you're releasing it for yourselves?
As of now, it's completely independent. So it'll be out under the Dead Mouse Productions banner, which is Gary Smart, who's co-producer, Chris Griffiths, and Adam Evans are the guys. They're all in England. They're the guys behind some other awesome documentaries about Hellraiser and Return of the Living Dead, and they have a RoboCop documentary coming out. So it's going to be under that brand, but hopefully we'll get some good distribution like I did with the Pet Sematary documentary. I mean, when Synapse Films picked it up and put it out on Blu-ray, that really helped the exposure. So hopefully we'll be able to entice a company to back it and give us like a big wide release in some way. So we'll see.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what I was going to ask you, we do cinema. We do movie screenings in a local cinema. Well, it's local to my co-host. It's not quite as local for me, but it's a private, like a standalone cinema. It's not one of the big chains. It's a small business, and I'd maybe want to discuss the possibility of doing a screening of your documentary.
Oh, dude, that was great, man. Absolutely.
I'll speak about it to you a little bit more once we've stopped recording, just to talk about the situation. But yeah, man, that would be awesome.
Absolutely.
So we have done an hour. You didn't expect to do an hour.
Oh, that's great, man. Well, I hope I didn't put you to sleep at any point, but
no, it's all fun. No, it really has been fun. So, like I said, we'll keep an eye out for the documentary coming out. Hopefully, like I said, we'll speak to you once we're finished.
Yeah,
and like I really enjoyed the first one. If it's anything like that, then we're on to a winner. And good luck with everything else you've got going on in the future. I hope it really goes well for you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah.
So yeah, again, John. Thanks very much for your time, man. It's been great.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.
Okay, and we'll speak soon.
All right. Cheers, man.
Okay. Bye-bye.